It was 3 a.m. The streets outside were empty, and the silence was almost suffocating. My stomach growled, and I gave in to the urge after all. Who could resist a Big D's fast food smiley box at this hour? A simple, harmless craving. At least, that's what I thought. The bag arrived, and something immediately felt off. No toy inside, just an unsettling weight. I thought it was a prank, a mix-up. But as I peeled open the wrapping, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. What should have been a fun, playful meal was now alive with something dark, something sinister, something that should never have been unwrapped. The air felt colder as I stared at the contents inside the box, my fingers trembling. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I froze. The hairs on my neck stood up. I spun around expecting to see the delivery driver. Maybe they had come to fix the mistake, but no one was there. The hairs on my neck prickled. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. It wasn't a waitress, but a shadow, a figure looming in the doorway. Someone or something had been watching me. In that moment, I understood. Some meals come with a side of horror, and some things are never meant to be unwrapped. But I was too late to turn back now. Click subscribe in the right corner to dive deeper into the terrifying mystery of the smiley box and the dark forces that come with it. It was one of those nights when the world outside my window felt unreal. The streets were empty, street lights flickering like they weren't quite ready to give up. The clock read 3 a.m., and I was hungry, unreasonably hungry. Pizza didn't appeal, leftover snacks weren't satisfying, but one thought lodged itself in my brain: a smiley box. Innocent, nostalgic, a small comfort. Ordering it felt almost like a dare. My phone glowed as I tapped the app, fingers trembling slightly, the silence of the night amplifying every click. The familiar ding of the order confirmation echoed like a heartbeat. Delivery would take 15 minutes. 15 minutes of eerie anticipation. 15 minutes for the world to feel just slightly off. The doorbell rang. Sharp, startling, too loud for such a quiet hour. I froze for a second, unsure if I was ready for normalcy or for whatever might walk through that door. The delivery driver smiled, mechanical and hurried, hands extended with the paper bag. "Smiley box," he said, and before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the shadows like he had never been there. The bag was warm, ordinary. Big D's fast food, the usual colors, the familiar smell of fries and burger. I exhaled, half relieved, half amused at my own anxiety. But as I lifted the paper bag onto the counter, a small movement caught my eye, a flicker of something too deliberate to be coincidence. I shook my head. It must be my imagination, probably just the flickering light, shadows playing tricks. Yet when I peeked inside, my stomach dropped. Where the toy should have been, something else rested in its place, small, humanoid, and it wasn't plastic. At first, disbelief clouded my fear. Maybe it was a prank, some elaborate joke by the Big D's fast food night shift. I reached out, cautiously, and the object twitched. Not like a reflex, not like an insect. This was deliberate. The hair on my arm stood on end as a cold dread seeped into me. I dropped the bag, but the object didn't stay. It rolled, inch by inch, toward me, as if drawn by some malevolent awareness. The air in the room thickened, pressing against my lungs, and I realized this was no ordinary smiley box. This was something alive, something watching, something that shouldn't exist. And in that instant, I understood. The night had just begun, and whatever was in that bag wasn't going to let me sleep, not ever again. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. The object in the smiley box wasn't a toy, and it certainly wasn't food. It was small, humanoid in shape, but grotesque, distorted limbs, painted features that weren't quite right, and eyes that seemed too aware, too alive. My brain screamed that it was impossible, yet my body could feel its presence, like a weight pressing against the air around it. I reached for it with trembling hands, as if touching it might break the spell or confirm the horror. The moment my fingers brushed its tiny form, it twitched violently, jerking away from me. Not like a reaction to touch, more like an intelligent response. My heart hammered, pounding so loudly I feared it would give away my terror. This isn't real, I whispered to myself, even as the thing rolled across the counter. Its movements were deliberate, calculating. I stumbled back, knocking over the fries, which tumbled onto the floor, but it didn't stop. It stopped only when it reached the edge of the counter, tilting slightly as though surveying me. And then, for a brief moment, I could have sworn it smiled. I backed away slowly, but my foot caught on the rug, sending me sprawling to the floor. The object shifted closer, almost cautiously, but purposefully. Its tiny eyes, dark and hollow, locked onto mine, and a chill ran down my spine. A soft, high-pitched sound echoed from it, more like a voice than a noise. I froze, every instinct screaming to flee, but my body wouldn't obey. Rationality fought panic. It's just a doll, just a toy, I told myself. Someone's playing a prank. Big D's fast food wouldn't. The thought trailed off into nothing as the object twitched again, this time in response to my words. My blood ran cold. This was no ordinary toy. Something about it was alive. Something that shouldn't exist in a smiley box or anywhere on this earth. I tried to throw it back into the bag, to close the lid and pretend none of this was happening. But when I looked again, it was no longer in the bag. It had moved, rolling slowly across the counter toward the sink, its tiny body unnaturally flexible, limbs bending in ways that defied reason. The realization hit me like a punch. It could move on its own, and it knew where I was. Panic surged. I grabbed a spatula and raised it defensively, my arm shaking. The object froze, tilting its head, watching. A soft scratching noise emerged like nails against plastic, almost taunting me. My chest tightened as I realized the horror wasn't just the object itself. It was its intelligence. It was aware. It was waiting. And I knew, deep in my bones, that whatever had arrived in that smiley box at 3 a.m. wasn't going to leave quietly. I forced myself to take a deep breath, though my chest felt like it was being squeezed by icy hands. The object remained on the counter, unnervingly still for a moment, as if it were waiting for me to make a move. My instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity, a dangerous, foolish curiosity, won. I had to know what I was dealing with. I edged closer, squinting at the grotesque figure. Its features were a twisted mockery of a child's toy tiny limbs bent at unnatural angles, a painted face cracked in strange patterns, and eyes too deep, too lifelike to belong on something manufactured. I could see the faint glint of wetness in its tiny sockets, almost like real eyes reflecting the dim kitchen light. I reached out slowly, the spatula still clutched in my trembling hands. My fingers hovered above the object, and the second I touched it, it jerked violently, spinning around like it was alive. The sound it made chilled me, a high-pitched, squeaky shriek that sounded almost like laughter. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. It rolled slightly toward the edge of the counter, then paused. That pause made my stomach twist. The way it seemed to assess me, it wasn't random movement. It was intentional, calculated. And the realization hit me like ice water. This thing was not just alive, it was intelligent. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and started searching frantically for anything: news stories, urban legends, online forums. My eyes skimmed over dozens of hits about haunted toys, cursed dolls, and objects possessed by spirits. None of them were comforting. Many ended the same way. The owner vanished, or worse, the object caused harm. A sudden noise made me jump. The object had moved again, now closer to the edge of the counter, its tiny hand resting on the kitchen ledge as if it were testing boundaries. I could almost feel its gaze boring into me, the sense of being watched prickling my skin. I grabbed a notepad, writing frantically, "Don't let it touch you. Don't turn your back. It's aware. It can move. It's not a toy." My hand shook so badly the pen slipped from my fingers. That was when it twitched violently, rolling toward me like it had read my thoughts. The lights flickered. A shadow stretched across the walls. Though there was no one else in the apartment, my stomach churned. This wasn't just a haunted object, it was hunting me, testing me, waiting for the moment I'd falter. I realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, that I had no idea how to stop it. And in that instant, a thought worse than fear gripped me. This wasn't going to end tonight. Whatever had arrived in that smiley box, whatever intelligence had taken root in that tiny body, wasn't going to rest. It had chosen me. And now, it was playing. I forced myself to take a deep breath, though my chest felt like it was being squeezed by icy hands. The object remained on the counter, unnervingly still for a moment, as if it were waiting for me to make a move. My instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity, a dangerous, foolish curiosity, won. I had to know what I was dealing with. I edged closer, squinting at the grotesque figure. Its features were a twisted mockery of a child's toy tiny limbs bent at unnatural angles, a painted face cracked in strange patterns, and eyes too deep, too lifelike to belong on something manufactured. I could see the faint glint of wetness in its tiny sockets, almost like real eyes reflecting the dim kitchen light. I reached out slowly, the spatula still clutched in my trembling hands. My fingers hovered above the object, and the second I touched it, it jerked violently, spinning around like it was alive. The sound it made chilled me, a high-pitched, squeaky shriek that sounded almost like laughter. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. It rolled slightly toward the edge of the counter, then paused. That pause made my stomach twist. The way it seemed to assess me, it wasn't random movement. It was intentional, calculated. And the realization hit me like ice water. This thing was not just alive, it was intelligent. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and started searching frantically for anything: news stories, urban legends, online forums. My eyes skimmed over dozens of hits about haunted toys, cursed dolls, and objects possessed by spirits. None of them were comforting. Many ended the same way. The owner vanished, or worse, the object caused harm. A sudden noise made me jump. The object had moved again, now closer to the edge of the counter, its tiny hand resting on the kitchen ledge as if it were testing boundaries. I could almost feel its gaze boring into me, the sense of being watched prickling my skin. I grabbed a notepad, writing frantically, "Don't let it touch you. Don't turn your back. It's aware. It can move. It's not a toy." My hand shook so badly the pen slipped from my fingers. That was when it twitched violently, rolling toward me like it had read my thoughts. The lights flickered. A shadow stretched across the walls. Though there was no one else in the apartment, my stomach churned. This wasn't just a haunted object, it was hunting me, testing me, waiting for the moment I'd falter. I realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, that I had no idea how to stop it. And in that instant, a thought worse than fear gripped me. This wasn't going to end tonight. Whatever had arrived in that smiley box, whatever intelligence had taken root in that tiny body, wasn't going to rest. It had chosen me. And now, it was playing. By the time the clock hit 3:37 a.m., I had barricaded myself in the living room. The kitchen light flickered behind the closed door, a weak pulse that illuminated slivers of movement beneath the gap. I didn't dare open it. I just sat there, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline, staring at the glow of the screen as if reality existed only inside that small rectangle of light. But the silence was too much. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the fridge made my heart stutter. Then I heard it, the faintest sound imaginable. Tap, tap, tap. Tiny footsteps. Slow, careful, coming from the kitchen. I froze. It was moving. The sound wasn't random. It had rhythm, intent, like something small and deliberate was exploring the apartment. The air thickened with dread as the footsteps stopped just outside the door. I held my breath, every muscle locking in place. Then, the handle turned. It didn't open, just rattled slightly, as though testing, Then again, rattle, rattle. My throat went dry. I grabbed the nearest object I could find, a lamp, and raised it above my head, ready to swing if that door moved an inch. The handle stilled. Silence again. Seconds passed. Then, minutes. I started to breathe again. Slowly, carefully. Maybe it had given up. Maybe it had gone back to wherever it came from. But just as I dared to lower the lamp, I heard a faint scrape, the unmistakable sound of something climbing. I turned my head. The sound wasn't coming from the kitchen anymore, it was above me. My gaze lifted toward the ceiling, and I saw it. The little thing was there, clinging upside down to the ceiling corner like an insect, its head twisted at an unnatural angle, eyes reflecting the dim light in a way that made my stomach turn. It was watching me. The lamp slipped from my trembling hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. The noise seemed to agitate it. It scurried across the ceiling with jerky, unnatural movements, limbs bending backward and sideways as if bones meant nothing to it. I stumbled backward, tripping over the couch, gasping as my knees hit the carpet. The thing paused directly above me, tilting its head slowly, almost mockingly. Its mouth opened not with a squeak this time, but with a faint whisper, a single word, soft and broken. "Play." My blood ran cold. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn it. Behind me, I could hear it drop to the floor with a dull thud, then those tiny footsteps again, faster this time, coming closer. When I finally yanked the door open and ran into the hallway, I didn't stop to look back. But even as I sprinted down the corridor, I could still hear it behind me. Tap, tap, tap. Not following, just pacing, waiting. I didn't stop running until my apartment building was far behind me. The streets were deserted, bathed in the pale glow of streetlights, each flicker making me jump. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, my lungs burning, but every instinct screamed to keep moving. At first, I thought I had escaped. The night was quiet, too quiet. The occasional distant bark of a dog or the hum of a car seemed surreal, like a dream. I slowed my pace, convincing myself that the thing, whatever it was, couldn't follow me. After all, it was just a toy, right? Then I heard it. A faint, deliberate tap, 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 soft and rhythmic. My stomach dropped. I froze mid-step, straining to hear. The sound was coming from behind me, matching my pace. Not fast, not erratic, precise. Every step I took, it took. Every turn I made, it adjusted. I spun around, flashlight from my phone cutting through the darkness. Nothing. The street was empty. Only the wind moved the leaves. Only the distant neon signs flickered. My hands trembled as I gripped the light tighter, but the steps continued. Tap, tap, tap. I broke into a sprint again, heart racing. The sound followed, unyielding. Every instinct screamed at me. It's not a toy. It's intelligent. It's hunting you. My mind raced, trying to rationalize. Maybe it had some mechanical mechanism, some battery, but that wouldn't explain the eyes, the movement, or the whispering word, play. I ducked into a small alley, hoping the shadows would conceal me. My breath came in ragged gasps. The tap, tap, tap paused. Silence. My chest heaved as adrenaline surged through me. Maybe I had lost it. Maybe the thing didn't know how to follow outside. Then a shadow moved. It was small, scuttling along the ground with impossible speed. I could barely make it out, a grotesque, twisted silhouette. Its limbs bent in ways no humans ever could, yet its movements were precise. Its head tilted unnaturally, and I could feel its gaze even from several feet away. I stumbled backward, tripping over a broken crate, landing hard on my side. My phone flew from my hands, the light spinning wildly across the alley walls. And then I saw it, fully, in the glow. The object from the Happy Meal, alive, watching, patient, waiting. It tilted its head and then squeaked. that high-pitched, malevolent sound that sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It scuttled closer, small claws clicking against the pavement, and I realized with a growing horror, the creature didn't just want attention, it wanted control. I had thought I could escape. I had thought I could survive the night. But now, it was clear. No amount of running, no barricade, no streetlight would protect me. It had chosen me. And it wasn't done playing. I didn't know where to go. The alleyways, once familiar shortcuts, now felt like a maze designed by something that knew my every move. My hands were scraped, knees bleeding, and my chest heaved from exhaustion and fear. The object, whatever it was, followed me with relentless precision, its tiny footsteps echoing in the night. I ducked into a corner shop, hoping for refuge, but the door slammed shut behind me with a force that sent my heart racing. The lights flickered, once, twice, then stabilized, revealing empty aisles, but I could feel it. The small creature had slipped inside, unnoticed, moving silently across the shelves. My breath caught. I backed toward the counter, scanning for anything I could use as a weapon. A heavy broom, a can of soda, anything. My hands landed on a metal baseball bat. The cold steel comforted me slightly, but I knew this thing wasn't ordinary. Smashing it wouldn't guarantee safety. And then it appeared, perched atop a display of chips, its grotesque limbs folded in impossible angles. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim fluorescent light. It tilted its head, as if mocking me, then squeaked the sound carrying a horrifying intelligence. Play. The word made my blood run cold. This wasn't a game, not a prank, not a mistake. It was hunting me, tormenting me, forcing me into a corner. My rational mind screamed for a solution, but the primal part of me, the part that just wanted to survive, took over. I swung the bat instinctively. The creature dodged with impossible speed, landing behind me with a soft thump. It was too fast, too small to hit, yet every movement was deliberate, calculating. I stumbled, knocking over shelves. Cans rolled, chips flew, but the thing didn't panic. It thrived in chaos. I realized then, the creature could manipulate the environment. The items around me weren't just obstacles, they were extensions of its will. Every sound, every movement, every shadow could be used to terrify and trap me. A sharp crash from the other side of the store made me spin. A glass bottle had shattered, seemingly on its own. Tiny scratches appeared across my arms and face, as if the object had reached me without touching me. My mind screamed that I was in a nightmare, that waking up would reveal this was all a hallucination, but I could feel it, the tangible presence of something alive, intelligent, and cruel. I cornered myself against the back wall, baseball bat raised, adrenaline surging. My eyes scanned the shelves, the aisles, every dark corner. The creature perched on a hanging display, watching. Its tiny head tilted, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a grin spread across its malformed face. "Play with me," it whispered this time, louder, more insistent. I swallowed, trembling. My only thought was survival. Run, hide, fight. Every option seemed doomed. And then, in a cold realization, I understood. The moment I had opened that Happy Meal at 3 a.m., I had signed a contract with terror itself. It wasn't just in my home, it was everywhere. And it was just getting started. I thought I had reached the limits of fear, but the creature was just beginning. The moment I backed into the corner, lights flickered violently, casting jagged shadows across the aisles. My phone screen glowed unnaturally bright, then went black. The sound of static filled the room, punctuated by faint whispers I couldn't decipher. The object wasn't just moving, it was controlling the environment. The flickering lights, the crashing bottles, the eerie whispers, they all came at its command. Every electronic device in the shop, my phone, the register, even the tiny neon open sign seemed to obey it. My blood ran cold. It scuttled across the floor, moving impossibly fast, limbs bending in ways that defied logic. I swung the bat, but it ducked and twisted, landing on a shelf above me. Its eyes glinted, reflecting my own panic back at me. And then it squeaked again, this time, a series of short, deliberate notes that felt almost like a command. I realized, too late, that the object could anticipate my movements. Every step I took, it mirrored. Every breath I drew, it timed. The room had become a trap. Every corner, every shadow, every object weaponized by this tiny predator. I ran toward the back door, only to find it locked. My hands shook violently as I yanked and pulled, the metal cold and immovable. Behind me, I heard the soft scraping of tiny claws against tile. The creature was coming. I grabbed a metal shelf support and swung it desperately, hitting it squarely. For a second it froze, teetering on the edge, and I thought I had a chance. But then it leapt down, landing silently, unharmed. It was like hitting a phantom, something not bound by the rules of the physical world. My mind reeled. I had to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Every door seemed blocked. Every shadow seemed alive. I felt like I was inside some living nightmare, the world bending around this tiny, grotesque thing that shouldn't exist. Then the whispers became voices, faint but intelligible. Play, stay, never leave. I realized the object was trying to communicate, or perhaps manipulate my perception. Every shadow, every movement, felt like it was urging me toward panic, toward submission. I backed into the corner, my bat shaking in my hands. The object paused, as if considering me. Its tiny chest heaved in a way that mimicked breathing. Then it spoke again, clear this time, alone, with me. I understood fully then. It didn't just want to scare me. It wanted control, complete control, and it was willing to wait as long as it took to break me, to make me powerless. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. I had survived the first encounters, but this was something entirely different. It wasn't just a toy, it was a predator. And my home, my apartment, my life, none of it was safe. I was trapped, and it knew it. I knew I had to get out. Staying meant inevitable terror. Every second I lingered, the object grew bolder, more cunning, its tiny movements calculated to push me to the edge of sanity. I gripped the bat tighter, knuckles white, and scanned the room for a path to escape. The back door wasn't just locked, it had shifted. The handle had somehow warped, smooth and unyielding. Panic clawed at my chest. I slammed against it, adrenaline propelling me, but it didn't budge. Behind me, the soft, deliberate scuttling of tiny claws grew louder, my breath caught. Then it leapt. The object struck, small but forceful, landing on my shoulder. I stumbled under the sudden weight, swinging wildly with the bat. It skittered off, landing atop a shelf, squeaking with what I could only interpret as amusement. Its malformed limbs allowed it to move with inhuman agility. I realized with growing horror that this wasn't a simple creature. It was designed to hunt, to torment. I ran toward the front door, sliding along the aisle, knocking over displays in my frantic escape. The creature darted across the floor like a shadow, limbs bending in impossible angles, moving faster than I could track. It leapt again, this time striking my ankle with a sharp, stabbing pain. I screamed, stumbling, falling to the floor. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, watching me with a predatory intelligence that chilled me to my core. The whispers returned, layered and overlapping. Play, stay, forever. I felt the weight of its gaze pressing down on me, its tiny form pulsing with malevolence. I scrambled backward, trying to reach the exit, but it blocked me. The object had anticipated my route, positioning itself strategically. Every escape plan I formulated in my mind collapsed before the reality of its presence. It wasn't just fast, it was clever. It was hunting me. I swung the bat again, striking the floor near it. The impact sent it leaping onto a nearby shelf, limbs twisting unnaturally, head cocked as if mocking me. My adrenaline surged. I knew I had one chance to get out, or be trapped forever in this nightmare. I lunged, rolling past it, sliding through the front door as it squeaked in pursuit. The cold night air hit me like a slap, reality snapping back, yet I knew the danger hadn't left. It was outside with me now. It could move anywhere, go anywhere, and it wouldn't stop until it had me. I didn't look back. I ran into the night, the streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. Every noise, every crackle, every small movement made me flinch. But no matter how far I ran, no matter how fast, the faint tapping, the tiny, deliberate steps followed. The nightmare had left the building, but it hadn't left me, and I realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't just a toy in a smiley box. This was something that would never let go. And it wanted me. I didn't stop running until my legs were numb, my lungs burning. I collapsed against the curb, trying to convince myself the creature had stayed behind. But the faint tap, tap, tap followed me, echoing from the shadows. I could feel its presence, even when I couldn't see it. It wasn't just fast. It wasn't just intelligent. It was supernatural. The thought hit me like ice water. Nothing about this object obeyed the rules of the natural world. Its speed, its agility, its ability to manipulate objects, it all defied logic. I glanced around desperately, looking for someone, anyone, who could help. The streets were empty, the city asleep, leaving me alone with the tiny malevolent thing that had followed me into the night. My phone was dead. The battery had drained inexplicably fast. That wasn't a coincidence. Then I heard it clearly, its squeaky voice louder, sharper, unmistakable. Play. Forever. I jumped, spinning around. A shadow moved near a parked car. The object was small, but it commanded attention. Its limbs twisted, head cocked unnaturally, eyes gleaming. It tilted its tiny body and squeaked again, as if aware I was analyzing it. My stomach churned. This wasn't a toy. It wasn't a prank. It was alive, cursed, possessed. Something from another world entirely. I had read urban legends about cursed dolls, haunted toys, objects infused with dark intent. But this was different. It was mobile, intelligent, and malevolent. And it wanted me. I knew I had to survive. I had to figure out how to contain it, trap it, or destroy it. But how do you stop something that doesn't obey the laws of physics? How do you fight something so small yet so powerful? Something that can anticipate your every move and manipulate your environment? I ducked into a convenience store, hoping to find refuge. A phone, something, anything. But the moment I stepped inside, I realized it had followed me. The lights flickered, a cold draft swept through the aisle, and cans tumbled from shelves as if pushed by unseen hands. It was already here. I grabbed a mop, holding it like a staff, trying to keep the object at bay. Its tiny head tilted, watching me carefully. Then, it moved a blur of motion across the linoleum floor, and I had to leap back to avoid it. My adrenaline surged. This wasn't going to be a simple game of hide and seek. It wasn't going to leave. Its supernatural abilities gave it the upper hand, and I was alone, unprepared, and terrified. I realized something worse than fear. This thing could follow me anywhere. Home, street, alley, it didn't matter. I was no longer safe anywhere. And I knew, deep down, that the night had only just begun. It had chosen me, and it wasn't going to stop until I was broken or gone. The convenience store was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerators. The clerk had vanished, no footsteps, no voice, no sign of anyone. It was as if the world had thinned out around me, leaving only me and it. I gripped the mop tighter, my hands trembling. I could sense it somewhere nearby. Every flicker of the fluorescent lights made my heart lurch. Every shadow stretched longer than it should have. The toy, no, the thing was watching. It wanted to play. My eyes darted across the aisles, looking for anything I could use. Duct tape, rope, cleaning supplies. I grabbed them, my mind racing. If this thing could move, it could be trapped. I didn't need to kill it. I just needed to contain it. I kicked open the staff room door, scanning for an enclosed space. Perfect small, with a single window and only one way in or out. I dragged a chair in front of the door, then began laying out a crude trap. A box, propped up with a stick. Beneath it, I scattered candy, bright and shiny wrappers that shimmered under the fluorescent light. It had been drawn to things that gleamed, that reflected light. Maybe this would lure it. The store lights flickered again. My breath hitched. The whisper came from behind me. "Play with me." I spun, but there was nothing there. Just empty aisles and the faint sound of soda dripping from a leaking bottle. I took a cautious step back, heart hammering. Then I saw it, its tiny shadow moving across the far wall. It was coming. I ducked behind the counter, crouching low. My eyes locked on the trap. The tapping grew louder, faster. It moved with purpose. I could almost hear it, breathing soft, uneven, deliberate. The candy wrappers crinkled. Then, silence. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then snap, the box fell. The stick clattered to the floor. I leapt up, slamming the chair against the box, pinning it down. Something inside thrashed violently, a guttural, inhuman screech echoing through the store. The box shook so hard, I thought it might splinter apart. I pressed down harder, my entire weight on the chair, gritting my teeth. "Stay down," I shouted, though the words came out as a desperate whisper. The sounds grew louder, scratching, growling, the faint, horrible sound of laughter. But then, slowly, it stopped. Silence. I didn't move for nearly a full minute. The lights above flickered back to normal, and for the first time in hours, I allowed myself a breath. I'd done it. I'd trapped the thing. But as I backed away, something caught my eye movement. The box was shaking again. Not violently this time. Gently. Rhythmic. Almost like breathing. Then, from underneath, a voice. "Nice try." And before I could react, the box split open from the inside. The box split open, and for a split second, I thought I had been wrong. Maybe it hadn't survived, but the sound that followed made my blood run cold. A faint squeak, then my own voice, perfectly imitated. "Help me! Help me!" I froze. My knees felt like jelly. My heart hammered in my chest as the creature scuttled out, its twisted limbs moving impossibly fast. It wasn't just alive. It was learning, adapting, mocking me. Every movement I had made, every sound I had uttered, it could replicate. It tilted its head, cocked its tiny body, and squeaked again. This time, it was a longer, more complex sound. My laughter from earlier, my own words from panic. The mimicry was precise, and that realization struck me with a terror that made my stomach churn. It was studying me. It knew me. I swung the bat, but it dodged effortlessly, rolling under a shelf and popping up behind me. I spun, swinging again, but the creature mirrored my motion, twisting in perfect sync, almost teasing me. My own reflection, my own fear, seemed to have come alive in this grotesque form. I ran, weaving through aisles, but the mimic followed, squeaking in sync with my footsteps, mocking my panic. Every turn I made, it anticipated. Every leap, every breath it mimicked, it mocked, it hunted. I realized, horrifyingly, that my fear was its power. The more panicked I became, the bolder it moved. The more I tried to fight, the more it learned. My heartbeat became a rhythm, my motions, a language it spoke and understood. I ducked behind a display, pressing my forehead to the cold metal. The squeaks and mimicked words came from every direction now. "Run. Run. Don't escape." I backed away slowly, trying to think. The creature was small, yes, but it had intelligence beyond imagination. And now it was using me against myself, turning my own body, my own actions, into its playground. I needed a plan. Mere brute force wouldn't work. I needed to outthink it. Something clever, something unpredictable, something it hadn't seen before. But the first step was survival. I had to make it stop following, at least long enough to regroup. I noticed the freezer section, the cold glass reflecting dim light. Maybe I could buy myself some time. I opened one of the doors and slipped inside, crouching behind frozen boxes of vegetables. My breath fogged the glass. The squeaks grew louder outside, tapping on the freezer door, a grotesque rhythm of curiosity and malice. Its tiny voice echoed in my own words, distorted, warped, mocking. "You can't hide from me." I pressed my back against the icy wall, shivering, trying to steady my racing heart. I knew I had survived its first attack. I had survived the trap. But the mimicry revealed something terrifying. It wasn't just hunting me, it was becoming me. And if it learned too much, I wouldn't survive the night. I pressed my face against the icy freezer door, trying to calm my racing heart. Every squeak, every tiny scuttling sound outside reminded me that it was still there, waiting, observing, learning. I needed to get out. Staying meant eventual death, or worse, being driven completely insane. Slowly, I inched toward the exit, careful to avoid any sudden movements. My hands were shaking, my palms sweaty, but I had to be quiet. When I peeked outside, the streets were empty. The neon lights of the city flickered, casting long shadows. For a moment, I thought maybe I had a chance. Maybe it had stayed behind in the store. Then, I saw it. Perched atop a mailbox, tiny and grotesque, its head cocked unnaturally, its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the streetlight. It had followed me, and now it wasn't alone. From the shadows, other objects began to move. A discarded soda can rolled unnaturally across the sidewalk. A traffic cone shifted, as if propelled by invisible hands. It had learned to manipulate the environment outside, just as it had inside, and worse, it was learning to control people. A man walked down the street, his phone illuminating his face. At first, I thought he was unaware, oblivious to the horror stalking him. But then his steps faltered. He stopped, staring at the ground. His movements became jerky, unnatural, and then he turned and looked directly at me, expression blank, robotic. The creature's influence reached beyond its small body. It could manipulate people, bend them to its will, turn them into extensions of its own nightmare. My stomach churned with fear. This was no longer a simple toy. This was a predator, a force that could dominate everything around it. I ran, sprinting down the street, my eyes darting to every shadow. The man, or whatever it had become, followed with unnatural steps, moving in perfect rhythm with the tiny creature perched on the mailbox. The tap-tap-tap of its tiny claws echoed in the air, matched by the stiff, jerky movements of the man now under its control. I knew I had to escape the city, get somewhere isolated, somewhere it couldn't manipulate as easily. But the thought was terrifying. It could adapt, it could learn, it could follow. I ducked into an alleyway, hoping to shake them off. The squeaks grew louder, the tapping closer, and the man's footsteps became louder too. It was playing a game with me, a deadly game that I had no choice but to participate in. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to survive. Brute force had failed. Traps had failed. Hiding had failed. I was facing a predator that could learn, adapt, and manipulate everything in its path. And I realized something horrifying. The night wasn't over. It had only just begun. I ducked deeper into the alley, heart hammering, every instinct screaming at me to keep moving. The squeaks and tiny claws tapping against the pavement echoed relentlessly, a horrifying rhythm that followed me wherever I went. I knew brute force alone wouldn't stop it, but maybe fire could. A dumpster sat nearby, its contents smoldering faintly from discarded cigarettes. I grabbed a discarded soda can and tipped it over, igniting the small flames with a lighter I found in my pocket. The flickering firelight illuminated the alley, and for a brief second, I felt a sliver of control. The object hesitated at the edge of the fire. Its twisted limbs twitched as it tilted its head, watching, calculating. The heat made it pause, and I realized it feared the flames, but only just enough to make me think I had an advantage. I grabbed a discarded broom handle and approached slowly. "Stay back!" I shouted, though the sound was swallowed by the night. The creature squeaked in response, an almost human-like laugh that made my blood run cold. Then it moved fast. Faster than I could track. It leapt over the flames, landing behind me, claws scraping against the brick wall. The fire illuminated its grotesque form for just a second, twisted limbs, glowing eyes, and a tiny mouth forming the word play in a way that sounded horrifyingly alive. I swung the broom wildly, but it ducked, rolled, and landed back at a safe distance, squeaking triumphantly. Its small voice, eerie and mocking, repeated my earlier words. "You can't stop me." I realized then the fire was only temporary. It slowed it, but it didn't stop it. The creature had learned, adapted, and was testing the limits of what it could endure. Each time I tried to burn it, it would evade, strike, and taunt, using my own panic against me. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. I needed more than fire. I needed a plan, something unpredictable, something it hadn't seen before. I glanced around the alley. Broken glass, metal scraps, trash cans, everything could be a weapon if I used it creatively. The creature scuttled closer, daring me, testing my resolve. Its squeaks became rapid, a staccato rhythm that matched my racing heartbeat. I realized it wasn't just hunting me, it was learning me, shaping me into a part of its game. And then, in the dim light of the flickering flames, it did something I hadn't anticipated. It spoke not just squeaks, not just mimicry, but real words. My own words from hours earlier, twisted and warped. "You can never leave." I swallowed hard, fear freezing me for a moment. The tiny, grotesque thing I had thought was a harmless toy had become a predator of unimaginable intelligence and cruelty. Fire slowed it, but it would not stop. And I understood, with growing horror, that survival wasn't enough. To live, I had to outthink it, outmaneuver it, and somehow make it make a mistake. I retreated further into the alley, chest heaving, mind spinning. The fire had slowed it, but the creature was relentless, its tiny glowing eyes never leaving me. I knew I needed more than instinct and courage. I needed knowledge. Back at my apartment, I rifled through my drawers, searching desperately for anything connected to the Happy Meal. Old toys, receipts, packaging, anything that could provide a clue. And then I found it. A crumpled leaflet from the Big D's fast food I had visited that night. It was odd, yellowed, almost ancient, despite being a few months old. On the back was a faint symbol, a tiny mark I had never noticed before. Curiosity overcame fear. I began researching, frantically typing into forums, blogs, obscure websites, anything about cursed toys, possessed dolls, and objects from that particular McDonald's. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Decades ago, a local toy manufacturer near the city had been investigated for dark rituals tied to mass-produced dolls. The company had gone bankrupt after a series of mysterious accidents, but some of its products had entered circulation anyway. Each doll or toy had been infused with a fragment of consciousness, a twisted spark of life designed to haunt and manipulate. And that meant what I had in my hands, or rather, following me, was no ordinary toy. It wasn't manufactured by accident. It was designed to prey on fear, to learn, to adapt. The Big D's fast food Happy Meal wasn't just a delivery. It was the perfect cover to unleash something small, seemingly innocent, yet horrifyingly intelligent. I realized that this knowledge was both terrifying and empowering. If I understood its origins, maybe I could anticipate its behavior. Maybe I could fight it strategically. But the moment I thought I was safe, I felt it again, a tiny presence behind me. Its squeaks were closer now, almost impatient, like it knew I had discovered its secret. My apartment suddenly felt like a trap. I spun around, bat in hand, but saw nothing, just shadows dancing on the walls, reflecting my own terror back at me. It was learning. It always learned. And it was clever enough to know that fear alone wasn't enough to control me. It had to escalate, to push me further, until I made a mistake. I set down the leaflet, trying to calm my racing mind. I had a plan forming, based on its origins, its weaknesses hinted at in the history I had uncovered. But I also knew one thing: time was running out. The creature was patient, but not infinitely so. It would strike when I least expected it. I gripped my bat tighter. Knowledge gave me hope, but only a fragile kind. I wasn't safe. Not yet. And I had a feeling the night ahead would reveal just how far this tiny predator could go. For now, all I could do was prepare and pray that my preparation was enough. Armed with the knowledge of its origins, I knew I had to be strategic. Brute force hadn't worked. Fire had slowed it temporarily. Now, I needed traps, lures, and patience. The creature thrived on fear, on reaction. To survive, I had to take control of the game. I gathered everything I could find in the apartment: boxes, tape, scissors, string, even old toys. I built a series of small cages, rigged to fall or trap anything that triggered them. I lined the hallway with objects that could be used as both bait and weapons, selecting the brightest, most reflective toys. It seemed drawn to anything shiny, anything that flickered under light. Next, I set up the most important part: the lure, a box propped delicately with sticks and string, with my flashlight inside, casting flickering shadows. I positioned it in the center of the living room, hoping to draw it out of hiding. I whispered to myself, trying to steady my shaking hands. It's clever, but predictable. It reacts to fear. It learns, but it can't resist curiosity. The room fell silent, too silent. My heart raced, ears straining for any sound of its tiny claws. Then a faint squeak, soft at first, almost cautious. My breath caught. The creature was out there, observing, calculating, deciding if it was worth approaching. I ducked behind a sofa, bat in hand, watching the box. The shadows flickered, moving slightly. The creature had arrived. Its tiny form emerged, limbs bending unnaturally, eyes glowing with that unholy intelligence. It sniffed, twitched, then tilted its head toward me. I held my breath as it crept closer, drawn by the flickering flashlight inside the box. It squeaked a short, sharp sequence, almost like laughter or a warning. I could see it analyzing the setup, testing the trap. My palms were sweaty, my knees weak, but I forced myself to stay still. The creature's curiosity overcame its caution. It approached the box cautiously, tapping at the sticks with its clawed hands. I could feel every second stretching into an eternity. Then it nudged the stick with a precise push. The box fell, but my trap held it collapsed in a way that trapped the tiny monster inside, pinning it down without crushing it. For a brief moment, the room was quiet. Victory? Maybe. But I knew better. The creature would learn from this. It would adapt. It was patient, relentless, intelligent, beyond comprehension. And I was not safe yet. I exhaled slowly, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I had it contained for now, but only temporarily. This was the first time I felt like I had some control over the situation. And that small, fleeting sense of power, precious as it was, gave me hope. Hope and the terrifying realization that this was only the beginning. Armed with the knowledge of its origins, I knew I had to be strategic. Brute force hadn't worked. Fire had slowed it temporarily. Now, I needed traps, lures, and patience. The creature thrived on fear, on reaction. To survive, I had to take control of the game. I gathered everything I could find in the apartment: boxes, tape, scissors, string, even old toys. I built a series of small cages, rigged to fall or trap anything that triggered them. I lined the hallway with objects that could be used as both bait and weapons, selecting the brightest, most reflective toys. It seemed drawn to anything shiny, anything that flickered under light. Next, I set up the most important part, the lure, a box propped delicately with sticks and string, with my flashlight inside, casting flickering shadows. I positioned it in the center of the living room, hoping to draw it out of hiding. I whispered to myself, trying to steady my shaking hands. It's clever, but predictable. It reacts to fear. It learns, but it can't resist curiosity. The room fell silent, too silent. My heart raced, ears straining for any sound of its tiny claws. Then a faint squeak, soft at first, almost cautious. My breath caught. The creature was out there, observing, calculating, deciding if it was worth approaching. I ducked behind a sofa, bat in hand, watching the box. The shadows flickered, moving slightly. The creature had arrived. Its tiny form emerged, limbs bending unnaturally, eyes glowing with that unholy intelligence. It sniffed, twitched, then tilted its head toward me. I held my breath as it crept closer, drawn by the flickering flashlight inside the box. It squeaked a short, sharp sequence, almost like laughter or a warning. I could see it analyzing the setup, testing the trap. My palms were sweaty, my knees weak, but I forced myself to stay still. The creature's curiosity overcame its caution. It approached the box cautiously, tapping at the sticks with its clawed hands. I could feel every second stretching into an eternity. Then it nudged the stick with a precise push. The box fell, but my trap held it collapsed in a way that trapped the tiny monster inside, pinning it down without crushing it. For a brief moment, the room was quiet. Victory? Maybe, but I knew better. The creature would learn from this. It would adapt. It was patient, relentless, intelligent, beyond comprehension. And I was not safe yet. I exhaled slowly, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I had it contained for now, but only temporarily. This was the first time I felt like I had some control over the situation. And that small, fleeting sense of power, precious as it was, gave me hope. Hope and the terrifying realization that this was only the beginning. I had no choice. Staying in the apartment was suicide. It had broken free of the trap, manipulated the environment, and demonstrated intelligence far beyond any normal toy. I needed space distance to think, to plan, to survive. I grabbed my coat, the bat still in hand, and opened the front door. The street outside was dark, eerily quiet, the neon signs flickering intermittently. My heart pounded as I stepped onto the pavement. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a potential threat. And then I heard it, the faint tapping, closer than before, following me. The creature had left the apartment, tracking me outside. I realized it had learned to navigate environments beyond my control. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a toy anymore. It was a predator with strategy, patience, and relentless curiosity. I ran. The cool night air burned my lungs, but I forced myself to push forward. I couldn't let it corner me. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, to avoid confined spaces. I needed a plan. Ahead, a narrow alley opened between two buildings. Risky, yes, but it might give me the chance to trap it again, to force it into a confined space where its manipulations would be limited. I ducked inside, bat raised, eyes scanning for movement. I could hear it, squeaking from the shadows. It had learned to mimic sounds again. My footsteps, my breathing, even the faint click of my lighter. The realization hit me like a blow. It wasn't just a hunter. It was a student, learning my habits, anticipating my moves. I set up a crude trap using debris and trash cans, creating a funnel toward a corner where I hoped it would be forced to confront me. I whispered to myself, trying to focus. Predictable behavior. Bait it, corner it. A movement, quick, precise, caught my eye. It appeared at the far end of the alley, tiny and grotesque. Glowing eyes fixed on me. Its limbs twisted unnaturally as it scuttled closer, squeaking in my own voice. Come, closer, play. I took a deep breath and swung the bat, but it dodged effortlessly, landing behind a trash can. The alley seemed to contract around me, objects shifting as if guided by unseen hands. I realized the trap alone wouldn't work. I had to combine it with deception, force, and my own unpredictability. My mind raced. I had learned its habits, its tendencies, but it had also adapted. Every instinct I relied on could be used against me. I was engaged in a mental duel with a creature that learned faster than I could anticipate. The alley became our battlefield. Shadows twisted, objects flew, the small, grotesque form darting with impossible speed. I realized, in that terrifying moment, that this creature could survive almost anything. But I had to outthink it to have even a sliver of hope. And as it squeaked, mocking and taunting, I understood something vital. The game had escalated. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was strategy, cunning, and the ultimate test of intelligence. I tightened my grip on the bat, bracing myself. The creature lunged. The alley was a war zone. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and the faint neon glow reflected off scattered debris, turning every object into a potential weapon or a threat. I knew brute force alone wouldn't work. The creature had adapted too quickly. I needed to combine everything I had learned: traps, fire, and unpredictability. I grabbed a broken metal canister and a lighter, tossing the canister toward a stack of old wooden pallets. Sparks flew, igniting the dry wood instantly. Flames crackled, licking the walls of the alley. I hoped the fire would force it into my makeshift funnel where I could trap it. It squeaked, a short, sharp, mocking sound that sounded eerily like my own voice. Its tiny glowing eyes reflected the flames as it paused, calculating. I could see it analyzing the fire, weighing risks. Then, in a blur, it darted to the far side of the alley, avoiding the flames with impossible agility. I swallowed hard, trying not to panic. I moved toward the funnel, adjusting my trap, baiting it with a shiny soda can. My hand shook, but I forced myself to focus. Every detail mattered. Its learning speed, its adaptability, its cunning. I had to be faster, smarter. It approached, skittering along the alley wall, making tiny squeaks that perfectly mimicked my earlier cries of fear. My stomach turned. It was taunting me, using my own reactions as a weapon. I gritted my teeth and held my ground. As it neared the trap, I struck, hitting the canister to topple it over the creature. It shrieked, squealing a distorted version of my own voice, but it was forced into the confined space I had created. I slammed a heavy piece of metal over it, trapping it temporarily. The fire flared higher, illuminating the alley and giving me a momentary sense of control. Breathing heavily, I realized this was my first real success. The creature, relentless and intelligent, had been forced into a confined space. For now, it couldn't manipulate the environment, couldn't strike me from unexpected angles. But my relief was short-lived. The trap held for only a few seconds before I noticed subtle movements underneath the metal. It was learning, adapting, even within this small enclosure. Its glowing eyes stared up at me, filled with malice and intellect. It was plotting its next move. I stepped back, trying to think. Knowledge had given me an advantage, but it wasn't enough. Survival depended on anticipation, cunning, and constant vigilance. One mistake, one lapse in focus, and it would be free again, stronger, smarter, deadlier. I gritted my teeth, realizing the terrifying truth. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a mental duel, a contest of intelligence between a human and a creature that could learn, adapt, and manipulate everything around it. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the night was far from over. The small, grotesque predator wasn't done with me yet. The alley was silent now, save for the crackling of the fire and the occasional pop from burning debris. I thought I had the creature contained, trapped within my makeshift metal enclosure. But a gnawing sense of unease told me this was only temporary. Then I heard it. Not close, not visible, yet unmistakable. A voice calling from the street, faint, trembling, and it was my own. "Help me, please." I froze, heart hammering. It had learned to mimic not just my voice, but my tone, My fear, my own cries for help echoed from corners of the street, distant yet eerily close. Panic surged. The mimicry wasn't just a psychological trick, it was bait, drawing attention to me. I turned, scanning the shadows. A figure emerged, walking slowly toward the alley, seemingly human. But the movements were wrong, jerky, unnatural. And then I realized the creature had extended its influence. It could manipulate others, or at least make them seem alive, luring me into traps. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, but I also knew I couldn't hide forever. The mimicry was clever, but not perfect. I could exploit that imperfection. I clenched my fists, gripping the bat and taking slow, deliberate steps forward. The creature's voice, my voice, continued to call from the street, closer now, more urgent. Help me, don't leave me. It was taunting me, playing on my humanity. I swallowed hard and forced myself to ignore it, focusing on the physical form trapped in the alley. I approached the enclosure. The metal shivered as if the creature were testing it, learning the limits. Its glowing eyes peered up at me, filled with intelligence and malice. It squeaked, a warped version of my own voice. You can't escape. Not ever. My mind raced. If it could manipulate sounds, it could manipulate people. The street, the city, it could extend its terror beyond this alley, using mimicry to ensnare others. I had to end it before it could reach more victims. I gathered debris and formed another line of defense, this one more elaborate, forcing it into a narrow corridor where it would have limited movement. I used my knowledge of its behavior, the way it reacted to confined spaces, fire, and shiny objects, to bait it, hoping to corner it without giving it room to adapt further. It squeaked again, and I froze. The voice wasn't just my own anymore. It was layered, multiplied, coming from different directions at once. Panic rose, but I forced myself to focus. The creature was intelligent, but I had a plan. I would use its mimicry against it, exploiting the chaos it created to finally trap it for good. The alley became a battlefield of sound, shadows, and strategy. My pulse pounded as I prepared for the final move, the one chance to contain the nightmare before it could escape the night. I knew I had one chance. The creature's mimicry was evolving, its intelligence growing with every move I made. If I hesitated, it would escape out into the city, spreading terror in ways I couldn't imagine. I needed a trap, but not a simple one. This had to be clever, unpredictable, and dangerous. I scavenged mirrors from the alley, broken fragments of reflective glass, and arranged them in a circular pattern around the creature's last known location. The reflections were meant to confuse, to disorient, giving me the advantage in the next moments. The small predator had learned to manipulate sound and environment, but would it be able to process its own multiplied image? Next, I set fire along the perimeter, careful not to let it spread uncontrollably. Flames licked the alley walls, casting distorted shadows across every surface. The creature paused at the edge, its glowing eyes flickering with confusion and curiosity. It squeaked my own voice again, layered, taunting, trying to manipulate me psychologically. I waited, holding my breath, bat gripped tight. It darted forward, attracted by the reflection and the chaos of the flickering fire. Its tiny claws scratched the ground, squeaks echoing off the walls, voices imitating mine from every direction. My heart raced as I realized the creature's intelligence was impressive, but it had limits. I swung the bat and struck a mirror at just the right angle. The creature's reflection multiplied, appearing in dozens of directions at once. It froze, momentarily disoriented by the contradictory images and shadows. The fire's heat added pressure, forcing it to make a move, but each path was blocked by debris or reflective surfaces. Squeaking frantically, the tiny predator attempted to leap through a narrow opening, only to be caught mid-motion by a strategically placed crate. Its glowing eyes glared at me, sharp and intelligent, but for the first time, I saw hesitation. It was learning, but not fast enough to overcome my setup. I forced the fire closer, trapping it in a confined space where it could manipulate neither reflection nor sound to escape. Its squeaks became frantic, warped, desperate. I could almost hear reasoning, a primitive intelligence trying to process the chaos I had created. The alley was tense, a battlefield of shadows, reflections, and fire. I waited, watching, breathing carefully, knowing that one wrong move could undo everything. Then, slowly, the creature stopped moving. Its glowing eyes dimmed, its squeaks fell silent. For a moment, the night was quiet, too quiet. I didn't dare move, fearing it was only pretending, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike again. But the reflections, the fire, and the meticulous trap had worked for now. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the confined, small, grotesque form. It was contained, its intelligence temporarily thwarted. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It would learn, adapt, and find a way. Survival had been won in this moment, but the war, I realized, was far from over. I knew the creature wasn't defeated, just contained. Its intelligence, its mimicry, its ability to manipulate objects and sound made it a terrifying force. Staying in the city was too risky. I had to remove it, isolate it, neutralize it, before it could escape again. I gathered supplies, a reinforced box, chains, tape, and gloves, thick enough to prevent it from slipping through. The fire had worked temporarily, but I needed something permanent, or at least semi-permanent. The goal was simple: containment, transport, and isolation. I carried the creature, carefully keeping it within the crate. Its glowing eyes pierced the darkness, a reminder of its malice. It squeaked and thrashed, testing every weakness in the box, learning its boundaries. I tightened the straps, forcing it into a space where movement was limited. Even then, I could see its mind working, analyzing, predicting. The night outside was eerily quiet. Streets were empty, shadows deep and long. I moved carefully, avoiding streetlights that might draw attention. Every step felt like a gamble. If it managed to manipulate something in the crate, it could escape. I couldn't risk it. I needed a location far from people, isolated enough that even if it broke free, it couldn't reach anyone. I thought of the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Long forgotten, decrepit, and secure, perfect for temporary containment. By the time I reached it, my arms ached and my nerves were frayed. I dragged the crate inside, locking the heavy metal doors behind me. The interior was dusty, filled with broken furniture and old machinery, but it would work. I arranged barriers, creating a secondary containment area within the warehouse, forcing the creature into a corner where movement was limited. It squeaked, mimicking my own voice again. "You can't stop me." The words echoed off the walls, bouncing between shadows, taunting me. I shivered. This small predator was more than just a toy. It was cunning, clever, and relentless. I stood back, taking stock of the situation. Fire, mirrors, traps, and now isolation. For the first time, I felt a measure of control, but also dread. I couldn't let my guard down for a second. It had adapted before, and it would adapt again. I began researching, scribbling notes, piecing together what I knew about its origins, its mimicry, and its behavior. There had to be a way to neutralize it permanently. If I understood the patterns of its intelligence, maybe I could predict its next moves and finally end this nightmare. But as I scribbled, a faint squeak echoed from the crate. The tiny eyes glowed brighter in the dim light. It was watching, learning, and planning. The isolation had slowed it, but it had not defeated it. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that this creature wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. And whatever I planned next, it would make me pay if I miscalculated. The night was far from over, and the nightmare had only just begun. I thought the warehouse was secure. Heavy doors, barricades, and isolation seemed like the perfect containment. But the creature had already proven it wasn't just clever, it was adaptable. Every squeak, every movement, every moment had taught it something new. I had been pacing, reviewing my notes, trying to predict its behavior when I heard it. A faint scratching sound, rhythmic and deliberate. My blood ran cold. It wasn't random, it was a plan. The crate shivered. Tiny claws scraped against the metal walls, the squeaks forming patterns almost like speech. It was communicating, analyzing weaknesses. I could see the shadows inside moving unnaturally, limbs contorting. The creature wasn't just trapped, it was plotting its escape. I moved closer, heart pounding, bat in hand. "Not tonight," I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm. But as I leaned in, I noticed the crate wasn't as secure as I thought. One corner was bent from its earlier struggles. My stomach dropped. In a blink, it acted. The creature twisted violently, slipping through the weakened corner with uncanny speed. My heart leapt into my throat. It wasn't just escaping, it was demonstrating intelligence beyond imagination. The tiny form darted across the warehouse floor, squeaking mockingly in my own voice. "You can't catch me." I swung the bat, but it dodged effortlessly, exploiting the confined environment to its advantage. Shadows danced, reflections distorted, and the creature used every inch of the space to evade capture. It wasn't just running, it was toying with me, testing my reactions, learning again. I realized I had to act quickly. The warehouse was filled with potential hazards. Old machinery, crates, wires. I needed to use the environment against it. I started pulling items into a narrow corridor, forcing it toward a corner where movement was limited. Each squeak it emitted, each mock of my voice, drove me further, but also gave me clues. It lunged, claws out, aiming for a gap between the stacked crates. I intercepted, slamming a heavy metal beam down just in time. It screeched, frustrated, and scurried to another corner. Its glowing eyes met mine, and for the first time, I felt a strange mix of fear and awe. This tiny creature was a master manipulator, relentless and intelligent beyond reason. Finally, I baited it with a shiny scrap of reflective metal, leading it toward a secondary trap I had improvised. It darted forward, hypnotized by its own reflection, and I slammed the metal cage over it, securing it tightly. Its squeaks were muffled, frustrated, but contained. I stood there, chest heaving, sweat dripping, realizing how close I had come to disaster. It wasn't defeated, only temporarily neutralized. Every encounter, every escape attempt had sharpened its mind. I knew the next step had to be permanent. I had to find a way to stop it completely, or the nightmare wouldn't end. I couldn't risk another close encounter. The creature had proven it could escape, manipulate, and adapt to nearly any situation. I needed knowledge, and knowledge required research. I returned to my apartment, still wary, the crate secured in the corner. I pored over books, articles, forums, anything about possessed objects, cursed toys, and supernatural phenomena. The more I learned, the more horrifying the picture became. This wasn't just a toy. It was something ancient, malevolent, and intelligent beyond comprehension. Legends spoke of objects housing restless spirits, entities that could mimic voices, manipulate environments, and learn from humans. Some recommended containment rituals. Others spoke of destruction through fire, dismemberment, or spiritual intervention, but nothing was guaranteed. I jotted notes frantically, trying to piece together a solution. It had to combine psychology, physical containment, and extreme measures. The creature wasn't just small and fast, it was a predator with a mind. To stop it permanently, I would have to anticipate its every move. I tested theories cautiously. Mirrors and fire had worked temporarily. Sound manipulation could distract it. Confined spaces limited its mobility. But permanent neutralization required precision. One wrong step, one miscalculation, and it would escape stronger, smarter, deadlier. I began designing a final trap, a combination of reinforced containment, psychological disorientation, and extreme deterrence. I would lure it using its own curiosity, exploiting the reflective surfaces, shadows, and sounds it was so fascinated by. Fire would guide its movement, while the reinforced enclosure would prevent escape. Hours passed as I refined the plan. My hands shook from exhaustion, but determination burned hotter than fear. This creature had haunted my nights, manipulated my reality, and driven me to the edge. I wouldn't let it win. Finally, I felt ready. Every detail had been accounted for, every contingency considered. The trap was designed to neutralize, not just contain. I couldn't predict its reaction entirely, but I could manipulate the battlefield. The creature would follow its instincts, and those instincts would lead it straight into my carefully orchestrated snare. I looked at the crate in the corner, its glowing eyes peering back at me. A small, mocking squeak echoed, distorted and layered my own voice, twisted by its intelligence. I swallowed hard, heart racing. It knew I was planning something, and I knew it would try to counter. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. I had studied it, learned from it, and prepared for it. The nightmare had been relentless, but knowledge and strategy were my weapons. The final confrontation was coming, and I would be ready. The night stretched on, dark and silent, as I prepared for what could be the end or the beginning of an even greater horror. I had spent hours preparing. Every reflection, every flicker of firelight, every sound had been calculated. This final trap wasn't just about containment, it was about neutralization. The creature had adapted to every previous attempt, but this time, I had forced the battlefield entirely under my control. I carried the crate into the alley once more, my hands shaking but precise. I arranged mirrors along the walls, angled to disorient, creating multiple false paths for the creature to chase its own reflection. Fire lines were set, carefully contained to guide its movements without giving it a chance to escape. The metal enclosure was reinforced, heavier than before, with additional locks and barriers. The creature's glowing eyes watched me from inside the crate. It squeaked, mimicking my own voice perfectly. "You can't stop me." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to ignore the psychological attack. It had learned to play with fear, but I had learned its limits. I opened the crate cautiously, baiting it with a shiny scrap of metal. It hesitated, then darted forward, attracted by the reflective surface. I waited, heart hammering, as it entered the first segment of the trap, a narrow corridor lined with mirrors and fire on both sides. Its squeaks became frantic, distorted echoes of my own voice. I tightened the enclosure behind it, forcing it into the final chamber. Every movement was predictable now. The creature could react, but it couldn't adapt fast enough. I had anticipated each leap, each twist of its limbs. It was trapped in its own curiosity, its intelligence working against it. Squeaks filled the air, layered and chaotic. As it struggled, flames licked the edges, reflections multiplied, and I slammed the reinforced cage over the final position. The creature thrashed violently, but the metal held. Its glowing eyes darted from reflection to reflection, trying to find a flaw, a way out. I backed away, breathing heavily. For the first time in days, I felt a measure of control. The creature was contained. Its intelligence and cunning, its mimicry, and its relentless adaptability had been neutralized, at least temporarily. But as I stood there, staring at the small, grotesque predator, I realized something chilling. Even contained, it had learned. Every encounter, every trap, every scare had taught it new ways to think, to plan, to anticipate. My victory was fragile. One mistake, one lapse in attention, and it could adapt again, stronger than ever. I secured additional locks and chains, triple-checking every detail. The alley returned to an uneasy silence, broken only by faint echoes of squeaks, muffled and frustrated. I had won this battle, but the war was far from over. As I stepped back, heart still racing, I knew one terrifying truth. The creature wasn't just a toy. It was a survivor, a predator, a cunning force that would continue to test boundaries. And somewhere deep inside, I feared it was already planning its next move. Containment was only half the battle. The creature wasn't just a predator. It was cunning, intelligent, and relentless. Physical traps alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to strike at its mind, exploit its instincts, and force it to falter. I studied its behavior carefully. It mimicked voices, adapted quickly, and learned from every encounter. Its intelligence was a weapon, and if I wanted to win, I had to turn that weapon against itself. The plan was simple: confusion, reflection, and psychological pressure. I set up more mirrors inside the reinforced cage, angled to create a labyrinth of reflections. The goal was to make the creature see multiple versions of itself, disorienting it. Then I introduced sound recordings of its own squeaks, layered and distorted, bouncing back from hidden speakers. Every noise, every reflection, was meant to overload its senses. It reacted immediately. The glowing eyes darted from reflection to reflection, squeaks rising in pitch and urgency. It tried to calculate the situation, to adapt, but the barrage of mirrored images and conflicting sounds created hesitation. For the first time, I noticed it faltering, unsure of where to strike. I continued the psychological assault, whispering commands in my own voice and then distorting them electronically, creating echoes that seemed to come from all directions. Its movements became erratic, misjudged. It lunged at shadows, squeaked at empty corners, and its intelligence, its greatest weapon, was now working against it. I watched, tense and alert, as it exhausted itself. Every attempt to escape, every twitch of its limbs revealed its frustration. The creature was powerful, relentless, and terrifying, but it was also fallible. Even the most cunning predator has a breaking point. Minutes stretched into hours. The alley outside was silent, except for the occasional crackle of the fire and the muffled sounds from the cage. I observed carefully, noting every pattern, every reaction. I had learned its weaknesses, its tendencies, and its limits. The psychological pressure was working. Finally, the creature slowed. Its glowing eyes dulled slightly. The frantic squeaks reduced to occasional frustrated chirps. It was still alive, still dangerous, but the mental overload had created a window of opportunity. I took a deep breath, realizing that knowledge and strategy had given me control, if only temporarily. The creature might recover, adapt, and learn again, but now I had the upper hand. Its mind, as lethal as its claws, was now vulnerable. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt hope. I could predict, manipulate, and plan. The creature was cunning, yes, but it was also reacting, learning from me, and that meant I could shape the next encounter. Survival depended on anticipating its intelligence and staying one step ahead. The night was far from over, but for the first time, I had a fighting chance. The predator was trapped, disoriented, and vulnerable, and I intended to make sure this time there would be no escape. I wasn't satisfied with just locking it up and hoping for the best. The creature had proven time and again that it could adapt, manipulate, and escape. I needed to know, definitively, that my trap would hold. I had to test it. I carefully approached the crate, my gloves gripping the reinforced metal edges. Its glowing eyes followed me, tracking every move. Squeaks emanated from inside, layered and mocking, mimicking my own anxious tone. "You can't control me." I swallowed hard. It was still intelligent, still dangerous, but now contained. I started with a simple test. I tilted the crate slightly, forcing it to shift and move within its confined space. Its reactions were immediate: claws scraping metal, squeaks sharp with frustration. It attempted to leap, twist, and pivot, testing every inch of the enclosure. I watched, noting patterns, tendencies, and reflexes. Next, I introduced controlled stimuli. Reflections, sounds, and even small obstacles were carefully positioned around the crate to see how it would react. Each squeak, each thrash, was analyzed. The creature's intelligence was formidable, but now its attempts were predictable. It learned, yes, but my trap anticipated its learning. Then I made a mistake, or so I thought. The crate shifted slightly too much, and for a fraction of a second, it seemed the creature might slip. Its glowing eyes gleamed with opportunity, its tiny form lunging instinctively. My heart leapt, and I slammed it back into place. The squeaks escalated into frantic, layered chaos. It wasn't just testing the physical constraints, it was testing me, evaluating the human on the other side. I realized then that this wasn't a simple predator-prey dynamic. It was a mental chess match, each move calculated, each reaction measured. Every squeak and thrash was both instinct and strategy. I straightened the crate, securing every lock, chain, and reinforced edge. The creature fell into the center, exhausted, panting, or at least panting in its own twisted way. The glowing eyes still watched, intelligent, calculating. I could see its mind racing, learning from the test, but there was no immediate escape. I stepped back, breathing heavily, and allowed myself a moment of grim satisfaction. The trap had held, even under the pressure of testing. I had forced it into limitations, exploited its instincts, and controlled its environment. But deep down, I knew containment wasn't the same as neutralization. The creature would adapt, evolve, and seek weaknesses. The next encounter could be even more dangerous. I had delayed it, bought myself time, and learned its patterns, but it was still alive, still intelligent, still malevolent. The night stretched on in silence. I watched the crate, the faint glow of its eyes, a constant reminder that this was far from over. Survival required vigilance, strategy, and constant adaptation. The predator had been contained, but the war was ongoing, and I was ready for whatever came next. I wasn't satisfied with just locking it up and hoping for the best. The creature had proven time and again that it could adapt, manipulate, and escape. I needed to know, definitively, that my trap would hold. I had to test it. I carefully approached the crate, my gloves gripping the reinforced metal edges. Its glowing eyes followed me, tracking every move. Squeaks emanated from inside, layered and mocking, mimicking my own anxious tone. "You can't control me." I swallowed hard. It was still intelligent, still dangerous, but now contained. I started with a simple test. I tilted the crate slightly, forcing it to shift and move within its confined space. Its reactions were immediate claws scraping metal, squeaks sharp with frustration. It attempted to leap, twist, and pivot, testing every inch of the enclosure. I watched, noting patterns, tendencies, and reflexes. Next, I introduced controlled stimuli. Reflections, sounds, and even small obstacles were carefully positioned around the crate to see how it would react. Each squeak, each thrash, was analyzed. The creature's intelligence was formidable, but now its attempts were predictable. It learned, yes, but my trap anticipated its learning. Then I made a mistake, or so I thought. The crate shifted slightly too much, and for a fraction of a second, it seemed the creature might slip. Its glowing eyes gleamed with opportunity, its tiny form lunging instinctively. My heart leapt, and I slammed it back into place. The squeaks escalated into frantic, layered chaos. It wasn't just testing the physical constraints, it was testing me, evaluating the human on the other side. I realized then that this wasn't a simple predator-prey dynamic. It was a mental chess match, each move calculated, each reaction measured. Every squeak and thrash was both instinct and strategy. I straightened the crate, securing every lock, chain, and reinforced edge. The creature fell into the center, exhausted, panting, or at least panting in its own twisted way. The glowing eyes still watched, intelligent, calculating. I could see its mind racing, learning from the test, but there was no immediate escape. I stepped back, breathing heavily, and allowed myself a moment of grim satisfaction. The trap had held, even under the pressure of testing. I had forced it into limitations, exploited its instincts, and controlled its environment. But deep down, I knew containment wasn't the same as neutralization. The creature would adapt, evolve, and seek weaknesses. The next encounter could be even more dangerous. I had delayed it, bought myself time, and learned its patterns, but it was still alive, still intelligent, still malevolent. The night stretched on in silence. I watched the crate, the faint glow of its eyes, a constant reminder that this was far from over. Survival required vigilance, strategy, and constant adaptation. The predator had been contained, but the war was ongoing, and I was ready for whatever came next. Even contained, the creature remained a predator. Its intelligence wasn't dulled by the reinforced crate or chains. It was calculating, patient, and still playing the mental game. I had contained its body, but could I contain its mind? I had been monitoring it for hours when I noticed a pattern. The squeaks, initially frantic, had become strategic, rhythmic almost. It wasn't just noise, it was communication, mimicry, a game designed to manipulate me. My own voice bounced back from hidden speakers, distorted and layered, but now I realized it was learning how to twist my words against me. "You think you win," it squeaked, perfectly mimicking my tone. I froze. Every word it repeated was designed to make me doubt my own strategy, to create hesitation. It had learned that hesitation was dangerous, and it was exploiting it. I stepped back, heart racing, realizing that the creature's intelligence extended beyond instinct. It was capable of psychological warfare, using mimicry to destabilize my focus, making me second-guess every move. This wasn't just survival, it was a test of mental endurance. I decided to counterattack. I recorded new sounds, mismatched and unpredictable, forcing the creature to adapt again. I introduced random flashes of light from a small LED setup, throwing reflections across the walls, disrupting the patterns it had learned. Each squeak it produced was met with chaos, a sensory overload designed to confuse it further. The creature reacted immediately, glowing eyes darting, claws scraping against metal, squeaks frantic and layered in a chaotic cacophony. For the first time, it hesitated longer than usual, unsure which reflection, which sound, which voice to trust. I could see its tiny body tense, calculating, testing new strategies, but my countermeasures were unpredictable, overwhelming its intelligence temporarily. Sweat dripped down my face as I watched. This was more than a trap, it was a mental battlefield, a war of wits between human and predator. I realized the stakes were higher than ever. One lapse, one misjudgment, and it could exploit it, escape, and the nightmare would escalate. After what felt like hours, the creature's frantic movements slowed. Its glowing eyes dimmed slightly, the squeaks reduced to occasional frustrated chirps. It wasn't defeated, it was learning, adapting, but the psychological pressure had bought me critical time. I stepped back, breathing heavily, understanding that the final chapter of this nightmare would require both physical containment and mental dominance. The creature was trapped, yes, but its cunning remained intact. I had survived the psychological games for now, but I knew the ultimate test was still ahead. The warehouse was silent. The only sound, the faint echo of frustrated squeaks and the distant hum of the city. I prepared myself mentally, knowing that the next confrontation would demand absolute precision, vigilance, and strategy. Survival depended on staying one step ahead of a predator that never stopped learning. It was 3 a.m. The streets outside were empty, and the silence was almost suffocating. My stomach growled, and I gave in to the urge. After all, who could resist a Big D's fast food smiley box at this hour? A simple, harmless craving. At least, that's what I thought. The bag arrived, and something immediately felt off. No toy inside, just an unsettling weight. I thought it was a prank, a mix-up. But as I peeled open the wrapping, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. What should have been a fun, playful meal was now alive with something dark, something sinister, something that should never have been unwrapped. The air felt colder as I stared at the contents inside the box, my fingers trembling. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I froze. The hairs on my neck stood up. I spun around, expecting to see the delivery driver. Maybe they had come to fix the mistake. But no one was there. The hairs on my neck prickled. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. It wasn't a waitress, but a shadow, a figure looming in the doorway. Someone or something had been watching me. In that moment, I understood. Some meals come with a side of horror, and some things are never meant to be unwrapped, but I was too late to turn back now. Click subscribe in the right corner to dive deeper into the terrifying mystery of the smiley box and the dark forces that come with it.